Okay. Darkestville Castle is a comedy-adventure game developed by Epic Llama and published by Buka Entertainment in 2017. It's available on Steam for Windows, macOS and Linux, and it is rather silly indeed. Here's the backstory. Things are quiet, peaceful and bright in the town of Darkestville until one day a star falls from the sky. This omen brings forth the worst thing ever to happen to these fair townsfolk. A baby named Sid. And it's even worse than that. He's a demon baby, you see, and they're not known for lover hugs. They're evil, it's what they do. And Sid grows into more of a trickster as he grows older, establishing a castle from which to unleash his evil plans of, well, just plain annoying everybody by the sound of it. He has a teddy bear named Mr. Buttons though, so he can't be all bad. After waking up and executing a surprisingly logical pruning of his to-do list, Sid meets his first real task of the day, dealing with the pesky Dan Teapot, who's come to thwart all his evil plans. One of these two thinks they're arch-nemeses, and it isn't Sid. Dan's super-heroic plan to stop the dastardly evil Sid is to blockade his front door and shut him in the castle. It's not an entirely serious game, by the way. Dan's not that stupid, though. He did remember to break the mechanism for the trapdoor he's now standing on. Sadly, he's still stupid enough to hand over the key to the basement where this mechanism is kept. So it's a trivial matter to repair the trapdoor and activate it. Trivial in adventure game terms, there's still like 4 inventory objects involved. It's here that Dan's master plan is revealed. And don't worry, this part is playable, but the story hasn't quite kicked off yet. Dan has hired a troop of legendary demon hunters called the Ramiro Brothers to take care of Sid once and for all. All Dan was doing was keeping them in place until the brothers got here. Having dealt with the Dan problem, Sid ventures into town to size these heroes up, see what he's up against. And while he's out, the Ramiros show up at the castle and kidnap his humongous pet fish. Apparently Dan didn't give the demon hunters even a vague description of the demon they were hunting. So after all that, our main quest is to help the evil overlord of mild annoyance rescue his pet fish. Did I mention this isn't an entirely serious game? This game with a giant monster-sized fish pet where the Ramiro brothers feature a sister who's a fox girl drawn in a completely different art style? What I'm saying is the game isn't entirely serious. I'm going to jump right into the technical aspects to start with. Interface-wise, it's kept simple. Almost everything is done with the left mouse button. You click a hotspot, you get a coin interface with grab, look and talk verbs. I thought having these so cramped and close together would be much more of a problem than it turned out to be. Sure, I clicked the wrong thing once or twice, but I found it far easier to slide over to the right verb than it is to properly aim the mouse cursor. You know, given how much I bring this up, I'm starting to think I have a problem using computer mice. Anyway, you get into your inventory with either the big button in the bottom left there, or by using the mouse wheel. I do like this use of the mouse wheel for inventory. Ever since I saw it in Deponia, it works very smoothly. Pick an item from said inventory and it'll attach itself to your cursor without having to click and drag. I'm a fan of that. When you're in the inventory, there's a look verb on each item so you can get yourself a description despite the lack of right click to examine functionality. Whilst the inventory has a keyboard shortcut, the hotspot highlighter doesn't get the same treatment, which may be explained by the achievement titled Wimp you get if you actually use it. How rude. And to top it all off, you can double-click exits to warp straight through them. Yay! Overall, it's a slick, easy-to-use interface that doesn't get in your way and feels good to use. The only thing I'd want to add is a keyboard shortcut for the hotspot highlighting button and or number keyboard shortcuts for the dialogue options, but I always say that. I mean, unless it's actually in there, because kind of pointless otherwise. Now, it's something of a trope that you can pick out any random comedy adventure game and you'll find Monkey Island in the advertising blurb, as if that's the only goddamn comedy adventure game out there. Out of all those games, and there are many, this game has a better right to invoke that comparison than any I've played in recent memory. There's some obvious bits you could point to. The clearly labelled 3-act structure, the way the chapters are introduced, the very Voodoo Lady sounding music, this hat, and those aren't to be ignored entirely, but those are just small things that anyone could throw into their game, and probably have done, appropriate or not. Let me put it this way, Most comedy adventure games will try to be funny by flat out telling jokes, regardless of the situation at hand, or failing that, punting out lazy references. Darkestville Castle, on the other hand, is just naturally funny. The dialogue is light-hearted and amusing without feeling forced, far closer to being on par with its inspiration than most titles can boast. It's not above doing a fourth wall gag either, another staple of lazy comedy game writing, but even those result in some genuinely decent jokes, and the rarity of their use gives them an element of surprise which helps them stick the landing. I mean, what can I say? A lot of the humour just works for me, and that, at least partly, is down to the protagonist. For an evil demon child trickster scamp, he's weirdly charming. Sure, his sole purpose is to be evil and annoy everybody within the same postcode, but he has such an infectious, almost childlike enthusiasm about it. You'd expect an evil character to be angry or brooding or at least smug. Not Sid, he's jolly and jovial, even to the people he's been antagonising all his life. Pissing other people off just makes him happy. He's excited to do it. It's what gets him up in the morning. Strangely wholesome in a way. I'd almost recommend this game to kids were it not for the use of at least one swear word, but it's one you can explain away as meaning fatherless child. That's pretty low on the totem pole for me. As anyone who's watched my Maybe Speaking review can attest, don't show that one to your kids. The way this humour is done, vaguely dark without feeling too mean-spirited, is, I think, why I like it. If you give me a protagonist with the barest glimpse of a personality and then try to have them spouting off jokes, it ends up sounding like, say, when a politician I don't like makes a joke. The delivery is usually so wooden and the jokes so out of character that I start wondering who wrote it for them. Sid's personality is pouring out of him, and everything he says sounds right, like something I believe he would say. And it turns out Sid is just a naturally funny guy. It's great to listen to, and I'm happy to spend a whole game with him. It's not just Sid either. The NPCs in this game, whilst not being particularly deep characters, are written and performed in a believable, albeit surreal way. Not an entirely serious game, remember. For as silly and bizarre as these characters get, their dialogue still makes sense, and that makes their interactions more enjoyable than a exposition vending machine. Just as well, since there's a fair few NPCs you'll need to talk to. See, this game takes a particular approach to puzzle design which is also found in its inspiration. A variety of object inventory puzzles related to smaller parts of a greater objective. The 3 trials in Monkey Island that let you become a pirate, the various parts of the time machine in Day of the Tentacle, giving you multiple sub-objectives related to your main goal that you can work on in any order. I realise this design philosophy isn't universally loved, but I like it. At its best, it gives you an alternative to work on should you get stuck on one line of inquiry. At its worst, the waters get muddied to the point where you have no idea what you're meant to do, or to which path a particular puzzle piece pertains. This game is in the former category, by the way. Some of the puzzles get a tiny bit moon logic-y in the middle part, but they're pretty understandable otherwise, and like I said, you get stuck on one path, you can go and work on another. This game has clearly had effort put into it, none of it looks lazy, and it kept me entertained for what Steam tells me is 4.5 hours. Weirdly, it felt a bit longer than that. Assuming the 4.5 hour figure is accurate, the asking price of £10.99 is on the higher end of the scale, but when you factor in the inclusion of animation, artwork and full voicing that it has, it makes sense to me. Those things add up. Whether or not that's worth it is, of course, up to you. So, as I've no doubt given away already, I had fun with Darkestville Castle. It's one of those games that's written and built solidly. Might not be an all-time classic, and only time will tell on that one, but at the very least, it's a game without any major flaws. It has well-executed humour and an imaginative world to walk around in. Pretty much the only things I can think to criticise are some minor issues in the English translation, nothing awful, just the odd typo, or the game restricting you to 6 save slots and not allowing manual saving. In fact, I'm not sure how the game does its auto-saving. It doesn't give any indication as to when it's happened. Of course, limiting save slots isn't so egregious if you can't manually save, at least compared to not letting you manually save. Still, if you're not convinced by my positive mouth bleatings, there's a free demo you can try before plopping down your dosh. And if you're looking for a challenge after reaching the end, The game features cat mode. What is cat mode, you may reasonably ask? Well, cat mode changes all the dialogue and item descriptions to cat noises. No, I'm not sure why either, but it's an option. Can't name another game that has that option. Hey, me again. Thanks for watching to the end. If you like what I'm doing here, there's the like button and the subscribe button for finding out when I'm doing more of these. There's also the dislike button in that general vicinity, up to you. And if you really like what I'm doing here and can afford it, I do have a Patreon, which is linked in the description below. So anyway, thanks again, and I shall see you again soon.